Here we are. It's Thursday. We're above the bar in the parlor. January 30th. It's 10 days into the new administration. Feels like a year. I'm Daniel. Thomas is unfortunately under the weather today, but we've got a great crew with us today. We've got Mike Germano joining us as a co-host. We've got Dan O'Prey from 1A1Z. Did I get it right? We'll get into that. We have Danny Stagg from Breez.
Too many Dans.
Too many Dans. With 3 Dans here on stage, right? How are we going to differentiate ourselves? Daniel, Danny,
gotta go a bit closer.
Dan.
Nice and simple.
And of course we have Umi. Can't forget Umi Miyahara, also from Breez. And we'll be talking a lot about the new report that's coming out about Bitcoin for payments, medium of exchange, something we know quite a bit about here at PubKey, but we want to bring the audience into the conversation. We've actually contributed to the report, so we've got some interesting data that we're going to be talking about. But we have some news today, which is why we changed the title of our space to be all about El Salvador. And I know that Mike is itching to chat about that, so I want to bring him up. Mike, are you there? Can you hear Mike?
Looks like he might be muted.
I can see him.
No.
There he is. Welcome.
Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Can you hear me,
Loud and
everybody?
clear. Loud and clear.
Ah, perfect. Well, thank you for letting me be on a PubKey space.
Our pleasure.
And just want to say, without hijacking the El Salvador title, and to pour one out for the El Salvador dreams.
Here we go.
I think it was important, if we're talking about Bitcoin for payments and merchants accepting Bitcoin, what was supposed to be the holy grail, the first country, the trailblazers to show us how to do it, just got pressured by the IMF and made amended their law last night. And as someone who, I was part of the first delegation to go down to El Salvador after they passed the law and helped them make the announcement at the Bitcoin conference, and was a guest of President Bukele's at his inauguration, and been to El Salvador numerous times. It's kind of sad to hear that they're, bending knee to the IMF. But, so pouring a little one out for them trying to be, I think, trailblazers in that state, and coming back down to reality a little bit, because really the law or how they changed it is, it's just not going to be mandatory for all the companies to accept Bitcoin. So, I think us as Bitcoiners, we want to make sure that the whole world is, on the Bitcoin standard here. But, is it government's role to say that every company should? And, even though they're saying Bitcoin's still legal tender, they're not going to force every business to accept Bitcoin, which I think is probably a good thing. So, the question is if it got the adoption it needed, and was that all play for Bukele to get that $1.5 billion of IMF sugar daddy money? And was it worth it to kind of change the rules?
Well, if you think about it, right, if you want the world to be on the Bitcoin standard, does it help or hinder that to have countries mandating it? Or should it really be all about individual acceptance? Isn't that how we grow the medium of exchange as a Bitcoin standard for the world?
Yeah, I would say the good and bad was when they made it. When they, I don't want the government to force anyone to do anything, but when the government forced the companies to accept Bitcoin, the best thing that came out of it was places like McDonald's and Starbucks and all the franchises down there had to accept Bitcoin. And truthfully, that was actually the best thing. I think to help our case was that why is the McDonald's in El Salvador being more innovative in how they process money than the McDonald's in New York or San Francisco? So that was like a really great way to kind of, and obviously there's franchise laws. I know they're not all owned by the same individuals and companies, but I think that really you can't just force every merchant to accept it, and that a lot of companies just weren't accepting it. So.
And really, do you feel that was more for the tourists and the cameras than anything else? Because there were a lot of people who were not native to El Salvador that were obviously there to explore maybe the first time they've ever used Bitcoin at a retail place before. And there were a lot of people from all over the world that were going to Starbucks, going to Wendy's, McDonald's, and so on.
Well, they just went to McDonald's. I think Aaron Von Werden made the McDonald's famous with the famous, purchasing. And it's funny because Aaron is a very Dutch person, and everyone's like, look at this American going to McDonald's, and he's the least American person there was. But that's the famous, McDonald's invoice, tweeted around the world that Bukele pushed out. But look, the truth is, for those of you who've been down there, and it's even worse because this announcement is coming right in the middle of the Plan B El Salvador conference. So while everyone's down there, it feels a little bit more of a burn that all the Bitcoiners that are coming to support are kind of down there. But the question of was it more of a fanfare thing? If you go to Bitcoin Beach, everyone accepts Bitcoin at Bitcoin Beach, right? But that's not the main city. In the main city, maybe that was used. It was definitely used for tourism. It was the best thing they ever did for tourism. Tourism massively increased in the country, but yeah, I'm not sure how much it was actually used as a medium of exchange for just regular El Salvadorian citizens.
I'd heard the main use case for the Chivo wallet, which is also they're going to be phasing that out soon, was for people sending dollars. They were just either cashing out what they received from the initial airdrops they got from the government, or they were just using it to send USD equivalents. They really weren't hodling or anything like that.
Yeah, well, I think the government's supposed to be transparent with that, and they might not be. But so instead of COVID stimulus dollars and those Biden bucks, you can drop the free Chiva dollars. So yeah, and once again, is the role of the government to try to create their own wallet. I mean, I think that might have been maybe. Was that for more fanfare and political, or would that become actually just an albatross that ended up paying, for them?
Yeah, and they had a lot of complaints about the user experience of the wallet, and there were a lot of support tickets that weren't getting responded to. It really wasn't maybe that well rolled out. But I was impressed when they did, once the law was enacted, McDonald's and other companies, they were really fast at getting the payments networks up and running. Like OpenNode, I think, was behind the McDonald's payments. That was like on day one, they had that already working. And I was impressed at the speed they got that off the ground. I was hoping we might be able to see something like that in other countries, but it seems like we're several years out from that now, and we haven't really seen that level of adoption.
Yeah, that's the worst part is, obviously it was announced at Bitcoin 21, and in 90 days, President Bukele enacted all this, and we haven't seen another country do it since. So the best we have is like Lugano, a city in Switzerland, but, we should have had I thought there'd be a whole lot of countries already at this point, and there's not. So I blame PubKey for not expanding into all these countries and making this happen.
It's our dream. PubKey in every city, except Boston. So what do we want to talk about now? I mean, the original topic for this conversation was Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. And with us, we have a esteemed guest group. I am not the smartest person in this room. And I feel like I'm in the right room because I want to be around people that I can learn from. So this is, for me, it's always a treat to talk to our guests because they know so much more about the state of the Bitcoin payments world and other technologies. So enlighten me as to where we are.
Being clever, I'm going to give that to Umi. Umi's far more intelligent than I am, as is Dan. But to just address as well, first of all, you said you were a bit nervous about doing this. Fantastic start.
Thank you.
I think everyone's enjoying this. So with El Salvador, I think it is exactly what it is. It's an experiment. It's not an RIP. It's done. It's many good advantages that have come from infrastructure. I'll get a bit closer. That have clearly won, like you mentioned then, Mike, about the 90 days, and then McDonald's was ready on day one. That's a real good sign that the technology is here, the technology is ready, the technology is able to scale. And then there are things that happen when you think of there are political necessities, and we're not going to get into the weeds of that. I'm not a political commentator, but Bukele has to speak to the El Salvadorian people, not Bitcoin theology, right? However, practical side, there's utility, there is a medium of exchange, and I think it's probably a better thing that the government isn't in control of the wallet and we let the private sector do its magic. So I think there's that. But when we move towards medium of exchange and the report that we've been working on, so what we've been focusing on is Bitcoin payments. The report's called Bitcoin payments from digital gold to everyday payments. Absolutely muck that up. Bitcoin payments from digital gold to everyday currency. And within the report, we basically highlight why now for Bitcoin payments what it means, the technology, where it's gone to, and we've showcased companies all around the world that do this, because what's apt about this conversation is even though we're based in the United States, we're talking about things that happen globally, from South Africa with Pick and Pay, Japan with Macari, and even a furniture store in Italy called Mondo Convenienza that accept Bitcoin. So there's a whole host of different case studies that we've got, and we talk and we go into depth about the technologies behind it. But I'll let the other guys chip in now. But Dan, co-author of the report, anything that I missed there?
No, that's a great summary. I think, really, similar to El Salvador, right? El Salvador was the first experiment in the world of making Bitcoin legal tender. It was the first experiment of mandating that merchants had to accept it. It was the first experiment of a government-created and controlled wallet. And I think, a lot of lessons that have been learned there, as Mike talked about. One of those, I'm sure, was an easy give for the El Salvadorian government of deprecating Chivo. It, as you mentioned, wasn't the best user experience, wasn't the best or easiest to use or most highly success rate wallet. In fact, the Lightning functionality was highly hidden away inside the wallet and very difficult for even Bitcoiners, let alone normal El Salvadorians trying to conduct commerce. So one of the things we touch on, in the report is about, increasing user experience, increasing where Lightning is today, increasing the ecosystem of infrastructure, of wallets, of tooling that makes it easier for businesses to accept Bitcoin. And that is dramatically different than it was 3-4 years ago when El Salvador rolled it out. That's dramatically different from 14, 15, when we had a flurry of big name companies sort of announce and then rescind adoption. And ultimately, I'm sure in the El Salvadorian case, just to touch back on that, agree with what was said. I'm sure it was an easy give for the El Salvadorian government to deprecate Chivo because they don't want to be in the business of maintaining a wallet, and there are others like Breez who are much better at that than governments are. And really, they never actually, I believe, mandated the usage. There was a 2 or 3 year grace period between until once you've had the education that is required to accept it, and once you have the tooling and technology to accept it, then you are mandated to use it. So again, just echoing what was said earlier, we're Bitcoiners, we tend to be libertarians, we tend to be pro-free market, so private sector usage of the creation of wallets and the options that come there is better than a government-controlled wallet. And bottoms-up adoption of the value of Bitcoin that we hope to illuminate in this report for why merchants actually benefit from accepting it through choice rather than force is a good thing. And then one other thing we touch on is different countries' treatment of Bitcoin and what that means. And the important thing to me for El Salvador is it's still legal to use it as tender, and it's still tax efficient to use it relative to other countries. So you're not paying capital gains. So Bitcoin will win on its own merits. It will compete on its own merits rather than government mandates. And the important parts of what were announced in the the El Salvadorian initial experiment still remain.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. Also, I think the fact that they're not accepting it for tax payments anymore is probably a good thing for hodlers who want to maybe get the most out of their Bitcoin and not have to give it back to the government. So maybe that's going to turn out to be a good thing after all.
Yeah, I think generally it was, it's a shame as an announcement, right? It sounds bad, but in practice, not a lot has changed on the development.
So what do you think? In this cycle that we're in right now, and it's kind of hard to define where we are in the cycle sometimes, but do we think there will be another country that will be announcing Bitcoin tender rules, or are they going to be mainly at this point focused on adoption, for the reserve, for being able to build a national stockpile? El Salvador has been already acquired around 6,000 Bitcoins so far, and they're showing no signs of slowing down. It doesn't look like this is going to change anything.
But they are showing signs of slowing down.
Tell us what you know, Mike.
Well, they have not. There's a couple days that they haven't been buying Bitcoin.
So that's a signal.
Rumor is that Bukele's got no more cash on hand, so it's Bitcoin's getting too expensive. So there's a couple days that they've skipped, and everyone's kind of freaking out, seeing if they're still going to buy Bitcoin one every day. And if we're really talking about nation-state adoption, maybe the most important part is from conversations we've had with countries that are looking at it, we need to have better numbers and reports that show why merchants should accept Bitcoin. And really the tourism side has been the one that's gotten countries most interested in why they would implement something like this. You know, they don't necessarily want to give tons of tax breaks, and they don't want to, you know, force businesses to accept things. But when you have the argument of this helps tourism and merchants know that this is going to get them more sales, then all of a sudden that's something they care about. And look, we all are, as Bitcoiners, want to pretend like everyone's always spending their Bitcoin wherever they go, but we all know that's not the case. So it'd be interesting to hear more about the kind of the report and how better could we get people to spend Bitcoin when they go to Bitcoin places, and kind of, you know, encourage that circular economy we all hope and talk about. So that's the part I'd be interested of how we can better advocate, because there's not a lot of information out there to really better advocate for why groups should be accepting Bitcoin.
I can actually maybe jump off of what Dan just mentioned about the regulatory treatment in various different places. And I think the biggest friction point today is capital gains tax. I think it's the most obvious one. So when we talk about nation states adopting and maybe, you know, is this a bad thing? Should we be more further forward or further back? Personally, I'm not worried what the governments do with adopting Bitcoin. It's what I think, Dan, you said about the ground up adoption. I think that's where this is going to have most impact. But when it comes to regulatory treatment, I think capital gains tax is arguably the biggest killer. And it's the one that if you were to sit there and go, okay, what's the one thing that could slow down medium of exchange? It's that. It's the thing that gives you the perception right now, especially in the United States. In the US, I think it's actually far more dominant because we're quite privileged.
Because there's not even a de minimis carve out. Like, you can't spend $100 and not have to worry about,
exactly,
did I record my cost basis for when I bought that tiny amount of Bitcoin 2 years ago?
And the fear of you know, as a Brit who I've now lived here, 8 years, is that you sit there and I fret. We were talking about taxes. I'm like, oh my God, sweating. I don't like any of that stuff. I don't like to think about it. And it's quite a different experience when you then go further afield, right? So if you can go to any country, and usually we then reference countries that don't have financial services that maybe we have in the United States, but I don't even think it's that. Within the United States, you've got 5.6 million households that are completely unbanked. And that's wild, right? It's wild in 2025 that you have that stat out there. But what I'm trying to get to is, I think when you have a US perspective and we look at it as an asset and we think about it that way, and the narrative is around that, and maybe the media narrative doubles down on that too, it's missing what's happening on that ground up adoption. And part of the report alludes to a lot of this, is that you're seeing these businesses adopt it and that people want to use it. There's a really good example in Japan with Mercari. Mercari is a marketplace, 23 million users, huge user base, 3 billion items they've got on the platform. And they've adopted Bitcoin payments, and the growth that they saw is wild, and it'll be within the report. But what I'm trying to get at is that there's this, people want a different way. They want to see a different way. And we have all the tools and technology to get there. And I kind of have meandered to this point, but medium of exchange is already here, is what I'm trying to get to. And I don't think, government or not, whether they want to get involved, kind of up to them.
Yeah, other than, as you say, like getting out the way, right?
Yeah.
There's you don't want the government to do something, but you do want them to get out the way of something happening and let it organically take place. And yeah, and having that exception, whatever that limit may be for tax-free spending, would be hugely helpful. And we talk about some of the different countries and their approaches to that, particularly with capital gains tax, as Danny said. But yeah, generally speaking, yeah, I think the prevailing narrative today is still the digital gold, store of value, buy it through an ETF, buy it, hold it, and that, can't kid ourselves that is the primary use case still today. But there is $2 trillion worth of value that is locked up and waiting to be accessible. And many of us, myself included, I'm living off Bitcoin at the moment. I'm having to sell it for fiat and then use that fiat. I would love to be able to spend Bitcoin more freely. I appreciate that's not the case for everybody, right? Most people are buying it because number will go up and things, will be more valuable. But that's not to say that that is the end of the story, right? So I think that's the part that sort of frustrates me with some of the common narratives now of, yes, digital gold is a helpful analogy, store of value is a good first use case, but let's not pretend the story stops there just because that's a large portion of the conversation today. As Danny said, there is a lot of usage. It's not $2 trillion worth of market cap being turned over every year. But it is meaningful and it is growing, and it will, we believe, continue to grow into the future.
And I want to bring up a point that Umi, you were talking about this morning. Mm-hmm. There is everyday solutions that Bitcoin as a medium of exchange can really fit into. So you had the PTA issue.
Yeah, so we're quite privileged. Everybody here, we live in the U.S., and sometimes a lot of people think, living in a country like the U.S., you don't need to use Bitcoin for peer-to-peer payments. I can just Venmo a friend easily, but I realized more and more, and I was talking to Danny earlier this morning about an example I had, and so I have two kids. They go to a public school in New York, and I have to pay for after-school extended daycare separately. And what the extended day PTA had told, I asked them, do they accept Bitcoin? That's how this all got started.
It starts there, doesn't it?
It starts there. Well, and the reason was because I got a new charge starting from this year. It's in 2025. With my regular, I think it's like $200, $300 monthly payment, there was a $9 charge that just came on my invoice. And I was like, what is this $9 charge? And they said last year, the program had to pay $45,000 in credit card processing fees. And so now they can't afford that. So they're going to try to take that $45,000 and pass it on to the parents. Or if I don't want to pay electronically, I could write them a check. But there's an easy way, Bitcoin. Like the Bitcoin is an easy way to be able to pay digitally on the internet. And not have to pay, it saves the $45,000 of fees that could actually be used for programs for the after-school care, for education, for different things. And that's the growth that it could be funding, but instead it's funding these credit card processing fees. So the issue and the friction there is like the capital gains or uncertainty around it, or how businesses, merchants are, concerned about how they should handle those Bitcoin payments. So clearly the technology is there for Bitcoin payments, but what's missing is kind of the understanding, the friction points with taxes, things like that kind of prohibit it, which is unfortunate.
And also what's missing is people just don't have it. And maybe that's where the education comes in. But there are a lot of people that don't know about Lightning. They don't know it exists. They don't know about eCash. They don't know about all the instant payment layer 2 technologies that are being developed. They still think of Bitcoin as 10-minute confirmations, 1-hour settlements. They think of it as slow, antiquated. And then you have that sort of creates a vacuum where other companies that create crypto projects come in and try to fill the void. It's why you see XRP suddenly becoming popular again. It's why other non-Bitcoin projects are active in Africa and other parts of the world where they want to become the medium of exchange. They want to be the de facto technology that people use as opposed to Bitcoin.
And within the report, we do discuss this as well, of like why stablecoins are not the solution. So short term, obviously, there are advantages that you can clearly say is that there's a perceived value of stability. So people are looking for a safe haven, which they think is the US dollar for now. And that kind of makes rational sense. But medium term, long term, and we were talking about this, Dan and I, just before we got to the bar, is what you're looking at with, sorry, the sound's just changed in my ear, but it's fine. But basically what you're looking at now is that it's just a digital representation of a conventional asset. And that asset is the dollar. That's controlled, that's centralized. You're at the whim of what the US government does or the entity that's backing that. Right. It's just it's paint on a turd. It's not. It's kind of
lipstick on a pig is the more common phrase.
I'm going with my own one there.
No, I like that one. I'm going to use that one.
But like, it's nonsensical, and people are shilling technologies that, cool, they make a better experience than what you got today. They don't make a radically different experience. And where you can then go with Bitcoin payments are, you can stream payments, you can zap, you can do real-time remittance. There are all of these different use cases. And it's kind of infuriating because there's so much marketing and noise on things that are just kind of nonsensical and not really worth a discussion.
But they have money.
But they have money.
Market.
They have money, and Bitcoin doesn't. Bitcoin Inc.
We are the marketing team for Bitcoin.
Bitcoin Inc. doesn't have a CMO, and it doesn't need it. And this is about the ground up adoption again. If you want to, it all kind of comes to the ethos of Bitcoin. And if you look at the trajectory and the maturity of it, things take time. That's a natural thing. It's worth the wait. And I think there's possibly an impatience, and I was going to use a reference to a soccer team, which I won't use now, but there's this modern impatience which is probably accelerated due to social media, and we want everything tomorrow, and that's just not going to happen. But we have all the tools. To go back to El Salvador, in 90 days the tools were just popped up. Yeah, there were teething problems, and
Well, it just shows if there is the will to do it, then it can get
all
done.
the technology's there.
We've had New York City has had maybe 3 bars that have ever accepted Bitcoin payments. We're not the first, by the way. We're the third, but we're the only one now that accepts it. And there might be 2 or 3 restaurants in New York City that you can spend sats at, and people are astounded by that when I tell them that.
New York's done great when it comes to finance, right? Because it's so great. Yet we've only just got tap to pay. Now, right? Like this kind
you can ride the subway now with your phone, right? But you couldn't do that a year ago.
That's what I'm trying to say is that it's entrenched. There's entrenched technologies, and they're gradually getting better. And cool, you're going to use your stable coin to do it, and it goes X% faster. Cool. That's not the long term, and these folks are completely missing it. So
people are just comfortable with centralized systems because they have that sort of reliability factor. It's like they know it's going to work. They don't really care that it's not, there's no sovereignty behind it. There's not you don't have private keys. It's just a thing that works.
My parents don't have a clue what I do. They think I'm some kind of crook. And
I think you're not alone in that.
And I think it's the accent that does it. But but my point is that that's I hate saying that we're so early because it's a little bit cliche, but the maturity of the technology is here. We are at the start of that, and I can't think of a more exciting time to really accelerate where we're going. And so, I get up every day and I'm like, yo, let's go. I'm tired today, but let's go.
I think, as you said, one of the coming back to what Daniel and Umi both said, is a couple of the biggest challenges are, one, people shouldn't need to know about Lightning, right? They should just be making Bitcoin payments. People don't know about TCP/IP or FTP or SMTP or HTTP. Maybe they've seen it in their URL, but you don't need to know about all of these technical details. And a lot of wallets still today, do make that distinction of Bitcoin or Lightning or Liquid or XYZ, different ways to use Bitcoin. User experience-wise, users don't care, right? They want to spend Bitcoin. They want to do it in the fastest, cheapest, most effective way. And as Umi was saying, a lot of consumers don't realize or care about what the costs are because they're very much hidden away from end users. Payments are free, right? We tap to pay and it doesn't cost us anything. Well, everything is 3.5% more expensive than it otherwise would have been, right? The merchant eats that. Well, I don't care about the merchant eating. Well, you do because they pass it on to you. Right, that's how you get your 2% back and your air miles and all your perks, is because you're paying more than the product would otherwise have cost, and they're giving you part of what you're paying more back. And users also don't know the difference between payment and settlement, and don't care most of the time because they're the same for a consumer.
Well, they only care when there's a chargeback.
Yeah,
right? Because then suddenly, you can, a credit card payment can take 90 to 180 days before it's finally settled, and for a merchant, there's a lot of risk there.
Merchants certainly care.
Yeah, but even just I had this experience a bunch of years ago. I was on Clubhouse, and Clubhouse had just started to monetize the platform, and so you had to sign up through Stripe. And I think someone tipped me $5 in a room that I was speaking in, and then a day or two later, they canceled the payment because they saw it on their statement. And they're like, "Oh, that's fraud," and so then Barclays Bank actually pulled the money back out of my account.
And charge you
and
for the
charged
privilege.
me $15 for the privilege of not getting $5.
Yeah.
And there was no recourse. Like, I couldn't even fight that.
I mean, that's a serious attack vector if
Yeah.
you want to screw with businesses. You do a bunch of payments and you do a bunch of chargebacks, and you're costing them a lot of money, right?
So you don't have chargebacks in Bitcoin. You don't have that problem. And, we tweeted about this. This is one of the points of, data that we gathered was if we accept payment in Bitcoin for one beer, 25 cents is saved over the cost of a credit card transaction fee. Over time, we can pass that back on to our customers. We can hodl that in our reserves. Like, there's major advantages to businesses that do accept Bitcoin and have a regular stream of customers that are paying that way, because then they can begin to eat away at those bank fees.
Yep, cheaper transactions and actual instant settlement, meaning, for people who aren't familiar with settlement or like bearer instruments, right, actually having access to the funds immediately, that you can actually immediately then go and spend them on something else rather than, as you say, waiting 90 or 180 days before you actually get the money. Like, that increases the velocity of payments within commerce and between businesses, and gives you that finality and surety that the money's not going to disappear. So these are all things that, like, for businesses, and we talk in the report actually all about, like, a couple of charities of use cases for them. Like, that's a huge thing when you get a donation. Can I actually use it to do some good in the world, or is it going to disappear 90 days later and I'm going to get charged for it and lose money? Those are, huge material, world impacting differences that just don't exist with the current system.
And I think one of the things is that the way that we exchange information right now. So anyone online, anywhere in the world right now can come in and they'll listen to our ramblings, right? But if you think about the way that value moves and the way the internet changed that, that's what Bitcoin can do for the exchange of value. So information now moves at the speed of that. That's what Bitcoin's able to do. And all of the benefits that you're seeing for the merchant, there are other benefits for the user as well that go far beyond. And as a digitally native asset, which Bitcoin is, that becomes far more interesting, because there's the use cases that we see at Breez where we've got applications that are now integrating Bitcoin payments who may have not been interested in Bitcoin before, and they're able to then add that value add without the headaches that come with modern payment systems. You can globally access anywhere right now. Within the report, we mentioned about BitNob. And Bernard had this thing where he was like, previously sending money between New York to Nigeria is particularly challenging. If you wanted to right now, you can send $10 to someone there. Done. Sorry, I keep flicking it in everyone's ears, but the point is that those benefits are real and they're happening today. And I can't think of a much more radical change. Again, it's early. I'm not saying it's here and everyone's using it. The whole country should adopt it. What I'm saying is, if you were to look at that nice little arrow, the trajectory's in a very nice place. I'm excited.
As well you should be. And that's one of the reasons why I got into Bitcoin in the first place too, was, it was the open source nature of it. It was the fact that it was peer-to-peer. It was just people sending payments to each other, and we're still, I think, maybe not quite at the place we want to be, but I see the roadmap there. I see that us, we're going to get there. The ability to be able to send value, send basically just a message from one person to another that represents value, is still kind of an earth-shattering concept for a lot of people. And it's hard for people to like grasp, right? Like in the early days of the internet, they didn't predict Uber and all these, Netflix, right? So it's hard to like see what that future will be like. But even practically today, when you talked about, I can just Venmo money. Well, what if the other person doesn't have Venmo? They got Cash App, or they go, whatever it may be. There's no interoperability between those systems, and sending money should be as easy as sending an email domestically and internationally. And it's when you actually look at those things, there's a ton of challenges and a ton of strife, and the interoperability, permissionless, openness nature, we've only scratched the surface of actually rolling that out and what that could actually mean for global commerce. There's also the fact that all of your normal transactions are surveilled, and it's like you don't have permission to send a payment unless the bank says it's okay, and that's not good. Like, that's not okay. And now how many times have you gotten a notice that there was a data breach, and suddenly like your credit card, your health records, other information of yours is just out on the dark web? And what do we do from that? And we collect these years of credit monitoring. Like that's kind of a badge of honor. Like, oh, I have 10 years of free credit monitoring now. Thanks, guys. But like, how do we get ourselves away from that world, and why are people still okay with that?
I think they're less okay with it, right? Like censorship is something we talk a lot about in Bitcoin. I don't think normal people really give a crap because they don't experience it, but they're starting to experience or hear about stories more, right? The U.S. censors Russia through sanctions by using the SWIFT system and cutting them off from that. Okay, fine. Russia invaded another country. Maybe you're fine with that. The Canadian truckers protest and they have their assets frozen in their bank account. Okay, don't know if I'm on their side or not, but that sounds a little worrying in a modern democracy. You had Nick Carter, here a couple of weeks ago at PubKey talking about Operation Choke Point, and that used to be just something that only Bitcoiners or only crypto people cared about, and now it's a big alarm call of actually the financial system can be used as a political tool to basically outlaw legal businesses. And in the report we touch on Proton Mail or Proton. The VPN and email service provider focuses on privacy, and there's other examples with like OnlyFans or gambling or
it's the same story over and over.
Yeah.
The Canadian truckers was just last cycle's version of WikiLeaks.
Yeah.
When 2013, when WikiLeaks was accepting credit card payments, their banks cut them off, and Bitcoin was the way that they received donations, and that was the thing that I think for a lot of people was the eye opener. It's definitely what caught my attention.
What also it also that's what caught RFK's attention. So what he stated, and when we originally had him at the Bitcoin conference, he told us it was seeing the Canadian truckers and seeing the bank accounts get frozen that really opened his eyes to Bitcoin as a solution to censorship. So it's exciting to also see these little moments. These are the things that open the eyes for other folks that make it bigger and bigger. And to be very blunt, if RFK didn't look into Bitcoin and talk about it, there would be no Trump talking about Bitcoin. So, if you look at the steps that it takes, a bunch of Canadian truckers really were the ones who helped get, Trump to accept Bitcoin, if you look at how that snowballed.
Absolutely. And those examples, are starting with more out there things that only people who are really paying attention to, or maybe, crazy Bitcoin kooks who hang out at a Bitcoin pub might care about, to increasingly more and more affecting normal people's lives and making it into mainstream media, right? WikiLeaks, RFK, has an incentive and motive to pay attention. Most people maybe didn't care, but, cutting off legal businesses and access to legal businesses and having people like Mark Andreessen and Elon Musk talk about that and make that mainstream, it's becoming more and more relatable, right? Which makes more normal people care about it in the mainstream, and that's obviously a bad thing for society, but it's in a way a good thing for Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We have a few minutes left, and I want to make sure we cover any other points that we want to talk about before we go downstairs and have the live show. Anything else that we missed from the report that might be interesting to cover?
Do you know what? In general, I think we've covered the gist.
So when will this be available?
We're planning on releasing next week.
Okay.
Bar a couple of things that we're working on.
You were writing this up to the last minute, and then the El Salvador story dropped.
We are pushing...
got updates to that section, yeah.
Yeah, but no, I think overall, it's just... I can't repeat it any further. It's a really exciting time, and the technology is here. We have the real-world impact, and now it's a case of pushing this further. This is the narrative. This is focusing on making sure that builders are able to build, and the tools are there. Like, obviously, I work for Breez. I'm going to shield Breez, but there are plenty of other options out there as well. But what those solutions that are being built that can integrate Bitcoin into everyday applications.
And that's kind of been Roy's guiding light all along.
100%.
He wrote that article about, it's not just building more Bitcoin wallets, it's building more Bitcoin apps.
Exactly. It needs to integrate into your everyday life and everyday applications. My phone is with me every minute of the day, and I think if we're able to integrate seamlessly into that, I always use my nan uses Instagram, she uses WhatsApp, she uses them all.
Right.
And it's really cool that she uses them because they're seamless and they're integrated and it's easy for her. Now imagine Bitcoin being part of those applications, etc. I mean, I don't think I trust her, but it would kind of get there. And Umi sees that arguably more than I do. But you see these applications that are building and the kind of questions they're asking.
Yeah, and it's been really interesting. I've been with Breez for over a year and a half, and initially, obviously, a lot of the builders who want to implement Bitcoin payments, and obviously Lightning is the way to enable the best UX of Bitcoin payments, started off in the Bitcoin community and Bitcoin circles, but it's faster than expected, just filtered into the crypto community. So the crypto community can't ignore Bitcoin, obviously. And we're seeing builders even reach beyond that already. Mainstream apps looking for different unique ways of. And the thing with payments, and I know Jeff Booth talks about this a lot, which I resonate with a lot as well, is it's incredible that right now in the current world that we are in, we are okay and we've normalized paying for payments. And what I mean is, why pay to accept a payment when you can do it literally almost for free with Bitcoin? Why pay to accept payments? Why pay to send a payment peer-to-peer? There's no reason to now because the technology is ready. We have Bitcoin.
But that's where I think the UX really makes a difference. And I think for a lot of people, at least maybe their first touch point with Lightning was one where they didn't understand the idea of channels and maybe didn't understand why they had to put Bitcoin into the wallet in order to receive, or why they had to buy a channel from an LSP in order to be able to receive, whether they're using Phoenix or whether they're using Zeus or any other of the traditional like node-based Bitcoin wallets.
We need to bring the
you
UX
have to have money to receive
away from
money.
that, though.
There's no
right?
Venmo-like experience there.
The user doesn't know what happens behind the scenes in Venmo. They don't need to care about channels or Lightning. They don't need to understand any of that, and that's where we've come to now, where we can represent that seamless UX. And I think it was a little bit overhyped or oversold in the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes time for any technology to mature, even the internet,
Yeah.
It takes decades from when it was a concept of, a version of a white paper for the internet itself. So I think what's exciting right now is that it is ready right now at this time. So
I asked Danny if it was okay to talk about this today, but so I did get an early preview of a new Breez product that I'm actually in love with. It's a wallet that does not require channels. You can receive a payment immediately as soon as you spin it up, and you have a seed phrase, so you can back it up. It's fully self-custodial, which I think is fantastic. One of the problems we have here in New York specifically, due to the BIT license, which is now almost 11 years old, if you can believe that, is that it's very difficult to get a Lightning wallet with a custodial provider here. Like Strike doesn't operate here. Cash App, you can't use Lightning here. Anything that's custodial is basically off the table unless you live outside of New York and you have a residential address in New Jersey. Those work, but you can't sign up for it if you live in New York. So how do you get more people? And that's actually pushed me to self-custody. It's why I started running a node. It's why I started exploring self-custody wallets. So when customers come to PubKey, they ask me, what wallet should I be using? And that actually it inspired me to create a list. And I've got this ever-evolving list that I keep downstairs at the bar. And the last time Danny was here, you introduced me to Francisco, who was building an app called Yopaki, mm-hmm. which is built on the Breez SDK. Mm-hmm. And it was the first time I'd seen a wallet like this, except for Aqua, where you can actually receive a Bitcoin payment over Lightning, and it goes into Liquid, and then you can spend it immediately. It feels like Lightning. It's as fast or almost as fast as Lightning, and it kind of opened the door to like, okay, this is the conversation we should be having. Like, what apps can we start recommending to customers? We had someone come in. I'm not going to name this person. He might be listening today, but he was a Solana guy, and he was using Phantom Wallet. Mm-hmm. And his question was, why can't I spend Bitcoin from my Phantom wallet at the bar? Of course, Phantom doesn't have Lightning built in. Like, what would it take to get these more mainstream, non-Bitcoin only wallets to be able to integrate with the Breez SDK so that they can start using it here?
Yeah, if we introduce them to Umi, off we go. That's it. But I think that's kind of the point. And the technology itself as well is ever evolving, which gets more exciting. Like we referenced in a post that we shared last week, that we're exploring new technologies, and so that user experience is only getting better. And I'm a user of your PubKey. I think it's a great app. I think it's a great.
The game in it is so fun, by the way. The Tableau 21.
Yeah, that's it. And
it's great.
You get 100 sats if you get a card. So.
I think I've earned like 3,000 sats off this game so far. It's addictive.
I think I got like $5. So cheers, Francisco.
You're ahead of me.
And anyway, but Umi.
But it's not out for Android yet, and I've been bugging him about that.
See, I think they're close. I think in fact they posted last week as well. I think they posted about it. However, I think maybe you could share a bit more on this, but I think it's getting those guys onboarded, right? And the interest is there. It's definitely accelerating, or we've seen it accelerate inbound at the moment. It's coming.
Everybody's going to be onboarded. I think, especially in the crypto space, it's just a matter of how soon. The ball is already rolling in terms of getting the momentum. It's already in place. We've already seen that. Especially, you'll see it when you read the report as well, of how much Lightning has proliferated throughout the ecosystem. So it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, we're moving beyond just Bitcoin companies adding Lightning, or even just crypto companies, right? Coinbase added Lightning not too long ago, Kraken, OKX, Binance, already had it. But now we've got like major fintechs, major banks actually adding it as well, like Nubank in Brazil and Salinas in Mexico. And we're actually starting to see non-Bitcoin financial institutions add the ability to send payments over Bitcoin, and also many that are just approaching it as using a Bitcoin behind the scenes as a rail as well, right? So the user may not even know that they're using Bitcoin, or need to care, or need to deal with any tax implications. They may just be sending US dollars, and the person's receiving local fiat. And Bitcoin's just, because it is an internet native bearer instrument and rail, and not just a patch on the existing financial system like stablecoins are, you can actually dramatically cut costs, even if the user doesn't know they're using Bitcoin. So that's an area that I'm sort of personally excited about. I want to get to the self-custodial Bitcoin circular economy as much as anyone else. But these are different areas that are moving in different paces, and I love seeing non-Bitcoin companies use it, even if Bitcoin's like fully abstracted away, because that helps build out the infrastructure, the adoption for native, non-custodial, self-custodial Bitcoin payments too.
Great. Well, this was awesome. I think we did all right. Didn't we do okay?
Yeah.
All right. Any last thoughts before we close out? Mike, do you have anything you want to end with?
No, this was great. Thank you for inviting me, guys.
Thanks for being a part of it. Thanks, everyone, for listening. And we're going to go down to the pub in about 30, 45 minutes. We're going to start the live event, Breez, 1A, 1Z. We're not calling it Z, right? Z.
I would love to, but no,
I want to hear you say
capitulated to the Americanized 1A, 1Z.
But yeah, we'll be down there. It's a packed house tonight. If you have registered, please try to arrive a few minutes early so you can get yourself situated. This is going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to it.
And I just want to say, I'm sorry, wow, PubKey is such a great place. Wish I was drinking there with everyone. So please have a El Salvador espresso martini for me or something like that. So make sure you have a special drink when you pour one out for El Salvador.
We'll do that for you. Thanks, everyone.